Hey guys, we are on week 5 of Not a Fan, and if you're wondering what chapters this is going to correlate with, it's going to be chapters 7 and 8 for this week. Next week's going to be chapters 9, 10, and 11, and then the last week's going to be the last 3 chapters, 12, 13, and 14. So that's kind of, if you're following along in the book, we're taking parts from that and making the small group out of that. So here's what we have tomorrow night. It's the relationship defined, anyone, an open invitation. And what I want you to do is I want you to start off with a story about a road trip. Maybe you got turned the wrong way, or if you're like Stephanie and I, we've had our GPS say you have arrived and we ended up being under a bridge in Atlanta and was nowhere near where we were supposed to be. So maybe something weird like that's happened to you. And so talk about that where you feel like you're on the right path, and then when you get to the end of the destination, you realize that you were wrong or the directions weren't what you thought they were. And then we're going to turn that somewhat funny story or just life story, and we're going to turn around and say, well, maybe that's happened to us spiritually. And we're going to ask the kids, how did you feel? We want them to kind of talk through that. Maybe they were scared. I was lost. I don't know about you, but Stephanie doesn't like to be scared. She doesn't like to be lost. If she does, she gets a little panicky, and understandably so. But as my mom always said, all roads lead somewhere. So I don't know. Maybe that's not the best of advice, but maybe it leaves you frustrated. You've spent so much time and you can't find where you're going, and you're going to be late, and so now you're rushed, and it's going to look bad. And what are people going to think because you didn't get there on time? So how did you react? Why did you react that way? Then I want you to turn around and say, well, have you ever wondered if you were on the right road in your relationship with Christ? And we're going to look at 2 verses that we've looked at a lot, the Matthew 7:13 through 23. It's going to be Matthew, mainly starting at verse 13 and 14, and then the other one is going to be looking at 21 through 23. So those are going to be the first text. What did you think when you read Matthew 7:13 and 14? Did you think you were on the narrow road, but really you're on the broad road? Maybe you only listen to Christian music, you come to church all the time, you don't curse, don't talk back, your heart might be far from Christ, though you do all the right things on the outside. So this week's really going to be a lot of students one-on-one, you asking them to go through. They're going to have a sheet that looks like this. Am I a follower? And it has 3 questions. Does your life reflect what you say you believe? Question 2, do you think you're on the right road because of anything you've done? And question 3, do I know Jesus and does he know me? And so those are the 3 things that they're going to have in front of them that they're going to be looking at as you guys talk and lead them that night. After you read through the verse, then you can go to Matthew 7:21 through 23, read that verse also. And then you're going to say, what was so shocking about this passage? The thing that was scary is they were calling Jesus Lord. They were worshiping him as God, but yet they didn't know him. There's a problem. They prophesied in his name. They cast out demons. They performed miracles, and yet they didn't know him. This wasn't just a small group of people. It says that many did this. There are going to be many on that last day who thought that they were followers, but they weren't. So the kids are going to have to start asking themselves the questions, and we should ask ourselves the question, what does a follower of Christ look like? They're going to fill out that sheet, am I a follower? And then after they go through that, you're going to talk through some things. The first thing with, does your life reflect what you say you believe? It's one thing to say that we believe in Jesus, but on the other hand, it's a whole other thing when's the last time that you helped someone in need? When's the last time you opened your Bible? When's the last time that you apologized to your parents or to someone that you wrongfully hurt or you were disrespectful? When's the last time that there was even a heart that said, I need to fix this? When was the last time you stopped someone from gossiping or doing something bad that they shouldn't do? When's the last time you stood up and said, no, that's enough. We're not doing that. Why would we do this? This breaks our relationship with the Lord. A belief without anything to back it up is just a delusion. You can believe that you can fly, but unless you can actually fly, you're just delusional. And it's the same with our Christian faith. We claim that we know Christ all day long, and yet do our lives back up what we say? Or are we just like our culture, or are we more like Christ? The second question, do you think you're on the right road because of anything you've done? You're not saved by your works. It's by faith. Now, works is going to manifest itself, or it's going to be a manifestation of the faith that you have, but you don't do it to earn something. You do it as a response of what God is doing in your life. It's I've seen and tasted His goodness, and it's like a cup. If I had a cup and I was pouring water in it, and it just starts overflowing, it's as I spend time connected to the source filling into me, as it overflows, it now impacts the other things around me. So people would say, "Oh, well, that's your works." No, no, no. It's really just me spending time with the Lord, and as He pours into me, and it fills me up, and it completely satisfies me. It then spreads over, and it consumes those around me. And everywhere I go, people around me are being impacted by the overpouring of Christ in my life. And so then, yes, it makes me want to leave a bigger tip for a waitress or a waiter. It makes me want to sit down and talk and offer to pray with the person who's on the bench who looks like something's going wrong in their life. It's the person on the side of the road who is holding a sign and says, "Help, I need money." And instead of you saying, well, what are they going to use this money for, or whatever, we need to go back and say, whatever we do unto the least of these, we do unto our Father in heaven. And so we want to serve them, because what we do, we're honoring Christ with that. So these people in Matthew 7, they were pointing on their works as evidence for how they knew Jesus, but works don't save us. True faith is going to be made evident, though, in how we live. And then the third question, do I know Jesus, and does He know me? If you go to page 109, you can go in your book so you can read the context of it, but there's this story, and what you're going to see is it's a story between a dad and her daughter. And then there's been some issues that have gone on. They haven't seen eye to eye. She's 15, and then he looks back at all what he's done for her, and he says, "I've done this, or I've done this, and other fathers haven't. I've been better at this." And he starts justifying all this stuff, and yet she responds after a little bit. She says, "But I feel like we don't even know each other." And we can do a lot of things for people, but not actually know them, and that's where we're going to come from. Is that how Jesus would respond to us? That I just don't feel like we've even known each other. You talked a lot about me, but you never talked to me. You sang a lot of songs about me, but you never sang to me. You gave a lot of your time away so that people would see you, but you never did it thinking you were serving me. You read all these other top-selling novels, and you listened to all this music that you thought honored me, but you really just did it so people would think you look good, but you didn't do it because you worried about what I thought of it. And so we've got to ask these questions. All right? From the beginning of our time together, you've been asking if we're fans or followers, if we're honest with ourselves. Most of us would have to say a lot of our lives look more like fans than followers. I'm not saying that you're not a follower, but I want you to show kids that even in our church culture, there's a lot of things that promote being fans of Christ more than being a follower of Christ. So fans are going to want a relationship with Jesus, but they just don't want the relationship. They only want the relationship on their own terms. I'll talk to God when I have time for Him. I'll do this when I have time for it. We've all probably heard John 3:16. It's big on belief. We've talked about this before. Okay? You can have the kids quote it. All right? But can we say Luke 9:23? May not. May not be able to. Maybe because we've been talking about it recently, but before then, no. If we're truly going to understand what Jesus wants of us, we have to know both John 3:16 and Luke 9:23. John 3:16 emphasizes the believing, and then Luke 9:23 is the following. But there's no believing without following. All right, it comes out of his book. And then I want you to tell a story about a stain. If you don't have one, in the Not a Fan book, page 117 to 119, page 121, there's some illustrations that he tells of a story about a stain. But we all have these things in our life where it's like a kid who, I remember spilling a drink, and then you try to clean it up, but then when you try to clean it up, you make it worse, and then you just flip the cushion over so no one sees it. Well, eventually someone sees it, and then they ask you, and you're like, "Oh, my fault." And then you have to own up to it. You can't blame it on the dog as much as you want to, or whatever. And we all have things in our lives. In fact, you can look through people in the Bible. Matthew was a tax collector. Peter, he denied Christ. Mary Magdalene, demon-possessed. A woman at the well, she was married 5 times and then was living with another man. You can go on and on. There was doubting Thomas. There was Jonah, who didn't want to go where God called him to. And there were all these things happening. So you might think that you have too much junk in your life, But there's no way you can ever move from being a fan to being a follower. When Jesus says, follow me, you think there must be some mistake. Doesn't he know who I am? Doesn't he know what I've done? I can't be good enough. If anybody knew about this in my life, they would not want to follow me. I can't follow Jesus. Jesus can't use me. That's what we tell ourselves. That's what Satan would have us to believe. And yet, Scripture is full of people whose lives were falling apart, and they were trying to hide stains, and yet God was dying for them. His blood was covering their sins, our sins, so that we could have everlasting life. So the cool thing is that Jesus does not tell us to follow, does not just tell us to follow. He shows us how to follow him. And then the question you want to ask for the students is, are you ready to really follow Jesus? You might have some kids who make a first-time decision. Ask kids if they have really decided to follow Christ in their lives. If not, then we need to start talking through the process of why be baptized. We need to look through the process of what does a new believer need to have a part of their life to know Christ and then to serve Christ. And so that'll be some follow-ups. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll even have some of those issues come up too. So Luke 9:23, you'll read it again just for emphasis and say anyone can come and follow him, and that means you. So no matter how messed up you are, how good you are. And that's going to be it for that night. And so I just want to close with this. We're again wrestling with Matthew 7:21, Luke 9:23, John 3:16, and we're looking at what does following Christ look like. Why do we do what we do? Do we do it to Christ, or do we do it so that people will look at us and say they must be following Christ? Do we do it so that we are honoring Christ and bringing joy to him, to know him, to find peace in him, to comfort in him? Or are we just doing it for a show? Are we doing it because we're told so? Are we doing it just to be good people? Why do we do what we do? And those three questions are going to show the students a lot about why they do what they do and if they need to make a heart change. And maybe some kids will say, I'm a follower of Christ, but I've just not been doing what I'm supposed to be, and I need to be better at it. So we're going to close with the time of praying for each other. I want you just to pray with the kids, maybe one-on-one, or ask if they want to hang out afterwards, and we'll do that. Also, if the weather's good, we're going to have some games outside that either before service or after service they can play. So if you see the kids there, jump out there, play with them, talk to them, hang out with them, and just have a good time. And then that way when we worship with them, it just builds that relationship. And then as you teach them, it builds that relationship because you are showing them that you care about them as people and as children who God longs to have, and not just because it's your job or your task. So let's make sure that we're continuing to do that. I thank you guys. You guys do that already. That's a short reminder. It can be easy to get in the focus of just what we teach, but it's also how we spend time with them, what we teach with our lives, and also in our lessons that matters. Thank you guys. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. And if you have any questions, you know how to contact me, and I will look forward to seeing you then. Be praying, and also just don't be forgetting, take some chances to fast, to seek the Lord by yourself. You don't have to tell me when you're doing it, but I'd love to hear about what God's doing in your life. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.